The last breath that changed everything. If you've ever felt your whole life collapse in a single beep, you'll understand what happened to me at 11:52 p.m. The ICU in downtown Chicago was too bright for grief. White lights, sterile sheets, machines that sounded like they were arguing with God. I'd been in that chair for so long my back forgot what standing felt like. My hands calloused, cracked. 71 years old, held my son's like I could anchor him here with stubbornness alone. Ethan Coleman. My boy. My only child. He didn't look like himself anymore. Cancer had a cruel way of turning strong men into whispers. But his eyes, those hazel eyes he got from his mom, still tried to fight for me. Dad, he breathed. Barely there. I leaned in so close I could feel the warmth fading from his mouth. I'm right here, son. His fingers tightened, like a final grip on a rope. Behind the painting, he said, voice thin as tissue. Safe? Envelope. It'll keep you safe. What painting? Ethan, what are you? My words fell apart. He tried to say more. He tried. I saw it in his face, the panic of a man dying with unfinished sentences. Then the monitor screamed a single flat line that sounded like a door slamming. I shoved the panic into my chest and pressed my hands to him. No, 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 not tonight. A nurse pulled me back gently. The doctor's lips moved. I knew what he said before he said it. I'm sorry, Mr. Coleman. That was the moment my world became a before and after. His wife arrived like a business meeting. Some people don't show grief, they show strategy. Vivian Cole, Ethan's wife, walked into that ICU room in a black coat that looked like it came with a price tag higher than my truck. She didn't stumble. She didn't gasp. She didn't crumble like a widow on TV. She checked her phone first, then glanced at my son's body like he was a report she didn't want to read. I came as soon as I could, she said, voice perfectly steady. He just died, I replied, and my throat sounded like gravel. Vivian's eyes flicked toward me, polite, empty. This is devastating. She typed something with her thumb. I need to contact legal. And the board. The board, not family, not love, not the man she married. A board. I stared at her, waiting for the breakdown, the tears, anything human. Instead, she smoothed her hair, turned to a nurse, and asked, Who do I speak to about the death certificate timeline? I felt something new under my grief. Not anger yet. Something colder. A warning. She finally looked at me again. Scott, you should go home, get rest. I'll handle everything. My son was still warm. You're leaving? I asked. It's late, she said, as if that explained it. And there are calls to make. 5 minutes. That's all she spent with Ethan's body. No kiss, no trembling hands, no goodbye. When the door shut behind her, one of the nurses whispered, I'm sorry, like she knew what kind of storm I'd just stepped into. His last words wouldn't let me sleep. Grief isn't just sadness, it's a loop that won't stop playing the same sentence. I returned to Ethan's house on the North Shore, just after 1 a.m., driving through cold rain that smeared the streetlights into blurry halos. The mansion was silent except for the hum of some unseen system keeping the place warm. My boots left muddy prints on floors so polished I could see my own ruined face. The guest room smelled like expensive candles and emptiness. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my coat, and tried to breathe. Behind the painting, safe, envelope. My son didn't waste words. He was an engineer at heart precision, purpose. If he used his final breath to tell me something, it wasn't sentimental. It was urgent. Around 2:10 a.m., I found myself walking down the hallway, like a man pulled by an invisible string. Ethan's office door wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. My boy never feared his own home. Inside, his desk was perfectly arranged. The room smelled like coffee and cedar, oddly comforting, like my old workshop back in Indiana. On the wall was a framed photo of Ethan at 10 years old in my garage, holding a crooked birdhouse we'd built together. Sawdust in his hair, smile too big for his face. I stood there shaking. That's when I noticed the painting across the room, an abstract piece in a heavy frame, expensive enough to make my stomach twist. Behind the painting, my fingers hovered at the edge of it. Whatever my son hid, he hid it for me. The safe opened with my birthday. Nothing punches you in the chest like realizing your child planned for your survival. The painting was heavier than it looked. I lifted it carefully and felt the back edge scrape the wall. Behind it, exactly where Ethan said, was a small digital safe mounted into the studs, sleek and black. A keypad glowed faintly. I swallowed hard. Okay, son. Okay. I tried to think like him. What code would he trust forever? Then I remembered something he said years ago, laughing, when he installed a lock on his first apartment. Dad, your birthday's the only number I never forget. My hands trembled as I punched it in. The 19th of July, 2053. A soft click. The door eased open. Inside was a manila envelope with my name in Ethan's handwriting. Dad, read first. I sat down in the chair behind his desk, like my bones suddenly weighed 100 pounds each. My vision blurred. I pulled the letter out. 3 pages, typed, signed in blue ink. The first sentence hit like a hammer. Dad, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and Vivian is going to show you who she really is. My breath caught. The next lines explained everything in brutal clarity. Vivian's affair. Her lover. Not a rumor. Not suspicion. Proof. For over a year. And then, the part that made my hands go numb. I moved everything into a protected structure. If she tries to hurt you or take what's mine, she'll learn she never owned any of it. You're safe, Dad. That's why I built it this way. I pressed the letter to my chest and broke quiet sobs at first, then shaking, ugly ones. Even dying. My son was still trying to protect me. I heard her laughing downstairs. The cruelest sound after a funeral isn't crying, it's someone celebrating. I folded Ethan's letter and slid it into my inside jacket pocket like it was a heartbeat I had to carry. Then I turned off the office light and stepped into the hallway. That's when I heard Vivian's voice from downstairs, bright, amused, the sound of a woman making plans. I know, she said, laughing softly. It's just a little longer. Once he leaves, you can move in. My stomach clenched. A second voice, lower, smooth. A woman's voice. Are you sure the old man won't cause problems? The voice asked. Vivian snorted. Scott, please. He's a nobody. A carpenter from Indiana. He'll pack his little bag and crawl back to his dusty shed. My knees felt weak. You'll be in Ethan's room by the weekend, Vivian promised. Ethan's room. Like my son was a hotel booking she was transferring. I stood there in the shadow of the stairs, my hands and fists so tight my nails cut my palms. But Ethan's letter was heavy against my chest, and it anchored me. Let her show you who she is. Then you'll know what to do. So I did something that felt impossible. I stayed silent. I turned around. I went back to the guest room. I lay on top of the bedspread, still wearing my clothes, and I stared at the ceiling until morning. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't speed, it's timing. The funeral was a performance, and she nailed it. When cameras show up to a funeral, grief becomes theater. Rain fell the next morning like Chicago itself was mourning. The cemetery was crowded, executives, politicians, reporters, people who'd never shared a meal with my son but wanted to be seen near his legacy. Ethan's casket was polished mahogany. The flowers looked like they cost more than my house. A line of black SUVs gleamed beside the path. I stood in the front row alone, wearing the same suit I'd worn to my wife's funeral 27 years ago. The sleeves were a little short. The fabric smelled like old closets. Vivian sat 3 seats away. Perfect posture, perfect makeup, a black veil, a trembling handkerchief. She dabbed at eyes that never truly watered. And there among the friends stood a tall woman with a sharp jawline and a designer coat. Her name, I later learned, was Kendall Price, Ethan's business partner, Vivian's lover. I saw Kendall's gaze find Vivian's, quick and intimate. Vivian looked away just fast enough for the cameras not to catch it. The priest spoke. The crowd murmured. Then Vivian stood to speak. She talked about Ethan like he was a product, his vision, his brilliance, his impact. 10 minutes of corporate worship. Not one word about the way he used to call me every Sunday, even when he was traveling. Then Kendall spoke. Ethan was a genius, she said smoothly. A friend. I wanted to stand up and scream. Instead, I held Ethan's letter in my pocket and waited for my turn. I said his name the way a father should. A mother can give you life, but a father gives you a place in the world until the day you bury him. When it was my turn to speak, my knees shook so badly I thought I might fall right into the mud. 200 faces stared, cameras aimed like weapons. I cleared my throat. Ethan was my son, I began, and my voice cracked immediately. I didn't hide it. My best friend. Silence fell, the kind that happens when real grief enters a room full of performance. I told them about the time Ethan was 8, and I taught him how to hold a hammer. He missed the nail, hit his thumb, cried hard for 30 seconds, then wiped his face and said, "Let's try again, Dad." Like failure was just a detour. That was Ethan, I said. He didn't quit on what he loved. I looked toward Vivian. She stared past me like I was a bad commercial. My son built big things, I continued. But the biggest thing he ever built was a good heart. I swallowed the rock in my throat, and I miss him so much I can barely breathe. People cried. Real tears, not Vivian. When I stepped down, I saw her check her watch. At the graveside, as they lowered my son into the earth, I heard Vivian whisper to Kendall behind the tent, "He'll be gone by tomorrow." Kendall replied, "Good. I'm tired of pretending." I didn't turn around. I didn't confront them. I simply touched the envelope in my pocket. Trust the plan. She kicked me out like I was trash. Nothing prepares you for being evicted from your child's life the day after you bury them. The morning after the funeral, I woke early, out of habit, and made coffee in Ethan's kitchen. My hands moved like muscle memory, even though my heart felt hollow. Vivian appeared at the table wearing silk loungewear like she was hosting a brunch, not cleaning up death. "Scott," she said, folding her hands, "we need to talk." I sat across from her. I thought I'd stay a few days, handle things, sort his. "There's nothing for you to handle," she cut in. "The attorneys and accountants will take care of everything." A cold pause. Then, "You need to go back to Indiana today." My chest tightened. "Vivian, Ethan died yesterday." She sighed, impatient, like I was slow. "Kendall is moving in this afternoon. She'll help me manage the estate and the company." "It's what Ethan would want." I stared at her. "Ethan would want his wife moving her lover into his bedroom?" Her eyes sharpened. "Watch your mouth." Then she leaned forward and said the part that still makes my blood run hot. "You don't belong here. This is Chicago money, Chicago power. You're a small-town carpenter." She slid a check across the table. 50,000. Consider it gratitude for raising him, like I was hired help. I pushed it back. "I don't want your money." Vivian stood. "Suit yourself. Be out by noon." At 11:30, I carried my duffel to my truck. A moving van pulled into the driveway, and Kendall Price stepped out, smiling like she'd won a prize. Vivian kissed her right there on the front steps, less than 24 hours after my son went into the ground. Back home, grief felt like a locked room. Sometimes the worst part of loss is returning to a life that no longer fits your body. The drive to Indiana was 8 hours of numb highway and blurry tears. I stopped twice for gas, once for coffee I didn't drink. I held the steering wheel so tight my hands cramped. When I finally pulled into my small house outside Fort Wayne, the porch light clicked on like it was welcoming a stranger. My workshop behind the house smelled like sawdust and old glue, comforting in a way that almost hurt. Ethan used to stand right where I stood now, asking questions about wood joints, pretending he wasn't impressed. I sat on my work stool and stared at the wall where a faded photo hung. Ethan at 12, holding a baseball bat he'd saved up for. Smile bright, life simple. A neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, came by with a casserole. She hugged me like she was trying to stitch my ribs back together. I nodded, thanked her, didn't eat. My phone kept ringing, a New York number, again and again. I knew who it was. Ethan wrote the name in his letter, Graham Whitmore, attorney. But I couldn't answer yet. Not because I didn't care. Because accepting the call meant admitting Ethan was truly gone and that he'd been planning for a war I hadn't even known existed. For 9 days, I lived like a ghost. Then, on the 10th day, the phone rang again, and something inside me finally snapped awake. The lawyer told me what my son really was. The biggest secrets aren't hidden from enemies, they're hidden from the people who'd never ask. "Mr. Coleman," the voice said, warm and calm. "This is Graham Whitmore. I'm sorry for your loss." I sat in the workshop, staring at a half-built cabinet I couldn't finish. "I know who you are," I whispered. "I need you to come to Manhattan," he said. "There are arrangements Ethan made. It must be in person." A part of me wanted to hang up, but Ethan's final words burned in my head. 2 days later, I drove to New York, feeling like a rusted pickup didn't belong anywhere near that skyline. Graham's office was high above the city glass walls. Marble floors, a receptionist who smiled like kindness was normal. Graham was in his 60s, silver hair, steady eyes. He shook my hand like I mattered. He led me into a conference room full of binders. Then he said it, calmly, like he was discussing weather. Your son didn't just have money, Mr. Coleman. Ethan built a protected holding structure worth over $1 trillion. I laughed once, an ugly sound. That's impossible. Graham slid a document toward me. I saw numbers that made my vision swim. Ethan was quiet about it, Graham said. He wanted peace. He also wanted you safe. He tapped the page. He placed you as sole beneficiary. Vivian receives a limited settlement as per their agreement. She cannot access the trust. My hands shook. Why would he? Because he discovered Vivian's affair, Graham said gently, and he knew what she'd do once he was gone. If you're still here with me, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it there? Drop it in the comments, because the next part is where everything starts to burn. Proof is heavier than grief. The moment you see betrayal in photographs, it stops being a suspicion and becomes a scar. Graham opened a thin folder and laid it on the table like a weapon. Inside were photos, Vivian and Kendall in a hotel lobby, hands intertwined. Vivian laughing in a private booth at a restaurant, Kendall's hand on her thigh. Timestamps, dates, locations. Over a year. Ethan had been dying while they were planning a life without him. Graham didn't let me drown, he spoke firmly, like a man holding a line. Ethan hired a private investigator. He documented everything. And there's more. More. He placed another file down, financial statements. Forensic accounting. Kendall Price has been siphoning funds, he said. Corporate skimming. Shell vendors. Fake invoices. Ethan discovered it shortly before his death. My stomach rolled. How much? Graham's face hardened. Hundreds of millions. Possibly more. The federal agencies are aware. Ethan wanted timing. He didn't want Vivian warned too early. My fingers gripped the edge of the table. $1 trillion. Affairs. Theft. Treachery. My son knew. He knew it all. And still, he used his last breath on me. Graham leaned closer. Mr. Coleman, Vivian is going to sue. She believes she's entitled to everything. She will make a spectacle. I swallowed. What do we do? Graham's eyes were steady. We let her. That felt wrong at first, like letting a snake roam free. But then I heard Ethan's voice in my head. Let her show the world who she is. Graham slid me a final envelope. Ethan wrote a statement for court. When the time comes, we use it. I took it like it was sacred. Then I drove back to Indiana with a new kind of grief, one with teeth. They celebrated while lawyers hit walls. The fastest way to reveal greed is to put a locked door in front of it. Back home, I tried to return to my quiet life, but the world didn't allow it. Vivian and Kendall posted constantly photos in Miami, champagne, designer shopping bags. The captions made me sick. New beginnings. Life is short, choose happiness. The comment sections were brutal. Some people called her a monster. Others defended her. Meanwhile, Graham updated me by phone. Vivian's attorneys were slamming into legal steel. Accounts, missing. Ownership, restructured. Assets, no longer in Ethan's estate. She's panicking, Graham said. But she's also arrogant. Days passed. Then weeks. Vivian's team filed demand letters. Threats. Claims. Graham remained calm. Let her escalate. The more she lies, the stronger our case becomes. I built things to keep my hands busy, tables, shelves, small birdhouses like the one Ethan and I made when he was 8. The work was the only time my mind stopped replaying the ICU. Then, one afternoon, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox with official markings. Cook County Court. I carried it into my workshop like it weighed 100 pounds. Inside was a summons. Vivian Cole versus the estate of Ethan Coleman. A hearing date circled in bold ink. My heart didn't race. It settled heavy, steady. I called Graham. It's time, I said. His voice was quiet satisfaction. Yes, Mr. Coleman. Pack your best suit. I looked at my reflection in a dusty window, an old carpenter with grief in his bones, and I whispered, Okay, son, let's finish what you started. Walking into Chicago felt like walking into her world. Nothing makes you feel poor like standing next to someone who believes money is oxygen. The courthouse in Chicago was stone and echo columns, security checkpoints, reporters sniffing for drama. Cameras turned toward me, as if my grief was content. Graham met me outside and adjusted my tie like a father might. You'll do fine, he said. Vivian arrived in a black SUV, stepping out like she was entering a gala. Kendall came with her, sunglasses on, jaw tight. They looked at me and smiled like they'd already won. Inside, the courtroom was packed. People whispered, heads turned. Vivian's lead attorney rose first, confident. Your Honor, my client is the lawful spouse and rightful heir. The judge entered. Judge Marla Whitfield, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that made everyone sit up straighter. I've reviewed preliminary filings, she said. Proceed. Vivian's attorney spoke about marital rights, unfair influence, and elderly manipulation, casting me as some greedy old man trying to steal what belonged to a widow. Vivian dabbed at her eyes for the cameras. Then Judge Whitfield nodded to Graham. Mr. Whitmore? Graham stood smoothly. Your Honor, there is no estate in the way Miss Cole claims. 3 weeks before his death, Ethan Coleman transferred his assets into a protected trust structure. Vivian's head snapped up. What trust? She hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. Graham didn't blink. The one that names Mr. Scott Coleman as sole beneficiary. The room erupted in murmurs. Vivian's smile died, and Kendall's face just for a second showed real fear. The truth landed like a gavel. There's a special kind of silence that happens when liars realize the room no longer belongs to them. Graham projected documents onto the screen, clean, official, impossible to argue with. He walked the court through it. Asset transfers, ownership restructuring, legal barriers designed specifically to prevent tampering. Judge Whitfield read, eyes narrowing. This appears comprehensive. Vivian stood abruptly. He would never do that. Ethan loved me. Judge Whitfield's gaze cut her down. Sit, Miss Cole. Vivian's attorney tried to recover. Even if such a structure exists, we contest capacity. Ethan was ill. Graham raised a finger. Ethan underwent competency evaluations, Your Honor. Multiple. He anticipated this exact claim. He handed up notarized statements. Then Graham did something that made my lungs freeze. Your Honor, we also submit evidence explaining why Ethan acted. He opened the envelope, Ethan wrote. The courtroom listened as Graham read my son's words, how he discovered the affair, how he documented betrayal, how he refused to let his life's work finance people who mocked him while he was dying. Vivian's face changed from anger to panic. Kendall stared at the floor. Graham's voice softened when he read the line Ethan wrote about me. My father worked with his hands and gave me a soul. He is the richest man I've ever known. I felt tears spill before I could stop them. Judge Whitfield cleared her throat once, like even she needed a moment. Then Graham added, almost casually, and there is also evidence of corporate theft committed by Miss Price. Kendall snapped up. What? Graham nodded to the back of the room. 2 federal agents stepped forward. The air changed. Even the reporters stopped whispering. The lover turned on the wife in real time. Nothing exposes fake love faster than real consequences. Kendall's attorney jumped to his feet. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Judge Whitfield held up a hand. Sit. Federal jurisdiction supersedes your performance. One agent approached Kendall. Miss Price, we need you to come with us. Kendall's face drained of color. Vivian, she snapped, turning toward my daughter-in-law like a drowning person reaching for air. You said this couldn't happen. Vivian looked at her like she'd never seen her before. Don't you dare drag me into your mess. Kendall's voice rose. Your mess? I did it for us. The courtroom watched their romance rot in real time. Judge Whitfield slammed the gavel. Order, Kendall shouted. You promised me Ethan was clueless. You promised the old man was nothing. Vivian's mask cracked fully. You stole from him. You were supposed to be careful. A reporter near the front mouthed. Oh my God, like this was better than TV. The agents took Kendall by the elbow. Kendall resisted, screaming, Vivian, help me! Vivian didn't move, not 1 inch, because that's what greed does. It turns people into mirrors. They only love what reflects profit. As Kendall was let out, Vivian's attorney tried to salvage the disaster. Judge Whitfield didn't look impressed. This matter is concluded for today. Further hearings will address Miss Cole's limited settlement, and I suggest Miss Cole consult criminal counsel if she believes she is implicated. Vivian's eyes found mine across the room, pure hatred. I didn't smile. I just thought of Ethan's last breath. Safe. Envelope. Protected you. He wasn't just protecting me from poverty. He was protecting me from her. The mansion wasn't mine, it was a grave. Winning a war doesn't feel good when the person you fought for is still gone. A week later, Graham handed me keys to the North Shore house. "Legally, it's yours now," he said. I drove there alone. The driveway looked the same, but the place felt gutted. Vivian had emptied it out. Furniture remained, but personal items were stripped clean. Photos removed, drawers bare. It felt less like a home and more like a staged property listing. I walked into Ethan's bedroom. The bed was made like a hotel. No trace of him, no books, no hoodie tossed over a chair, no scent of his cologne. Then I went into his closet. In the back corner sat a cardboard box, labeled in Ethan's handwriting. "Dad's stuff." My throat tightened. Inside was a toolbox, old, scarred, worn smooth, where hands had held it for decades. I recognized it instantly. I gave it to Ethan when he was 16, back when our biggest worry was whether he'd get into a decent college. On the side was a small metal plate engraved, "Build your dream, son, love, Dad." I held it to my chest and finally let my grief pour out like it had been damned for months. Not the dramatic crying people do in public, the kind where you don't make sound because you can't breathe. Ethan kept my toolbox through everything, through boardrooms, flights, private meetings, secret empires. Because deep down, he never stopped being my boy. I chose building over burning. The moment you have power is the moment you decide what kind of man you really are. Everyone expected me to destroy Vivian publicly, to sue her, shame her, drag her name across every headline. Graham asked carefully, "What would you like to do next?" I stared at Ethan's toolbox, then at the letter he left behind. And I realized something. If I used this fortune only to punish, Vivian would still win in a way because she'd turned my love into bitterness. So I made a different decision. We sold the mansion. We sold properties Ethan never even got to enjoy. We liquidated assets that felt like trophies. And with Graham's help, I announced the Ethan Coleman Foundation for Honest Work, a massive scholarship and vocational program for kids from blue-collar families. Not charity with pity, opportunity with dignity. At the press conference, cameras flashed. A reporter asked, "Mr. Coleman, why not keep the money?" I said, "Because my son didn't build this to worship wealth. He built it to mean something." Another asked, "Do you have anything to say about Vivian Cole?" I paused. "Vivian made her choices," I said. "Ethan made his. I'm here to honor his." The room went quiet, like even the reporters felt the weight of a father refusing to be poisoned. I walked off the stage holding the toolbox, and I felt just for a breath like Ethan was walking beside me. Back in my workshop, I found his legacy. Healing doesn't happen in courtrooms, it happens in places that still smell like who you used to be. 6 months later, I returned to Indiana for good. My workshop expanded new tools, new benches, young voices filling the air. 12 teenagers showed up the first week. Some had trouble at school. Some had no father at home. Some had hands made for work, but nobody to teach them how. I didn't talk about the money much. I didn't talk about Vivian at all. I taught them how to measure twice and cut once, how to sand with patience, how to fix mistakes without shame. One boy named Marcus, 16, angry eyes, struggled with a shelf joint. He slammed the wood down like it had offended him. I walked over, guided his hands. He looked up at me. "Is it true your son was, like, insanely rich?" I nodded. "He had a lot of money." Marcus frowned. "So why are you here? Why are you doing this?" I pointed to the photo on the wall, Ethan at 10, in this same workshop, covered in sawdust, smiling. "Because he learned wealth right here," I said. "And it wasn't dollars." Marcus stared at the photo a long time. Then he said quietly, "I want to be rich like that." My throat tightened. "Then you're already on your way." After the kids left, I sat alone with Ethan's toolbox in my lap, and for the first time since the ICU, I felt my grief shift, still heavy, still painful, but no longer pointless. 1 year later, I brought him the only thing that mattered. The hardest conversations are the ones you have with someone who can't answer back. On the 1-year anniversary of Ethan's death, I flew to Chicago alone and visited his grave early in the morning. The sky was bright, almost insulting after that rainy funeral day. Birds sang like they didn't know the world could break. I sat beside the headstone and rested my palm against cold stone. "Hey, son," I whispered. "It's been a year." I told him everything, the foundation, the kids, the scholarships, the workshop program spreading to other states. I told him about Marcus and how he smiled for the first time after finishing his first project. Then my voice cracked. "I miss you," I admitted. "Every morning I forget for 1 second. Then I remember. and it hits all over again. I pulled Ethan's letter out of my jacket, the same one I'd carried like a heartbeat, and I read a line aloud. "You said I'd know what to do," I whispered. "I think I do." I sat there until my legs went numb, listening to wind move through trees. When I finally stood, I left his toolbox-shaped keychain at the base of the stone, something small, something symbolic. And as I walked away, I realized something. Vivian didn't just lose money. She lost the only person who ever truly loved her. And she didn't even know it until it was too late. What he left behind wasn't money, it was a lesson. If this story makes your chest feel tight, it's because you recognize the truth inside it. Years passed. The foundation grew. Thousands of kids learned trades, earned degrees, built businesses, rebuilt families. Ethan's name became something bigger than tech headlines. But for me, the real success wasn't press coverage. It was a boy who once thought he was worthless, learning to build a table with his own hands, then standing back and realizing, I made that. Late one night, I stood in my workshop alone. The lights were off except one lamp over the workbench. Ethan's photo stared back at me from the wall. I ran my fingers over the worn handle of his toolbox, and I whispered, "You kept me safe, son." Not from losing a house, not from losing money, from losing myself. Because if I'd chased revenge, I would have turned into the very thing Ethan hated, someone who measures life by what they can take. Instead, I built something that lasts. And if you're still listening right now, I want to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have destroyed her? Forgiven her? Walked away? Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what you think Vivian truly deserved, because I read those, and I promise you, your story matters too. And please, don't wait to tell the people you love what they mean to you. I had a lifetime with my son, and I'd trade every dollar in the world for one more hour in that ICU room just to hear him say, "Dad, one more time." Because true wealth isn't what you leave behind. It's who you loved and who loved you back.